All right. So tonight it is my pleasure to interview John Douillard. Yeah, it's fine. Thanks. That way it gets both of us. And you know, I know of him, and we just met just recently, so we could talk a little bit about what this interview was going to be about. But I've seen his business grow substantially over the course of the last few years. And it's part because my office is just right down, my building is right down the street from his office. And when he was in there giving me a tour, he showed me all the offices they've expanded into and the other service lines they're into. So it was really exciting to kind of recircle around. And so tonight's format is basically we're going to get to know John on a personal level. And then we're going to kind of go through the layers of him becoming an entrepreneur, what he does, the industry he's in, and then kind of a macro view, and that's where we'll end. We'll also have opportunity for you guys to ask questions, and so I'll turn that over, and that's on the last part of it. And then as we wrap up that, then everyone in here will get a chance to introduce yourself. So think about a 10-second commercial that you want to share about who you are and what you're doing. So that way when we break for networking, people will be able to find people they want to connect with. So first of all, so thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
And so I read a lot about your bio, and one of the things that jumped out at me is I read that you have 6 children. Is that true?
Well, I didn't have a whole lot to do with that. I was my wife carried the heavy load there, but
yeah.
I met my wife in India in 1986. I was there studying Ayurveda. She left after about 3.5, 4 weeks or so, and then I sort of missed her. And about 4 months later, I came back, and 2 months later, we got married on the beach in Hawaii. We've been married 26 years, and 6 kids later, we're still together. I mean, we have 6 kids. I recommend my kids to not ever do that, because that was like super risky. But we lucked out, and it's been amazing. Yeah, it's just been incredible.
That's great. So tell me, there's this myth, I believe it's a myth, around this work-life balance piece, right?
Yeah.
And so if a lot of people might think I'm like 6 kids, like I can't have any kids, and I'm still struggling to keep my job and my business going. How did you balance it for you? What was the balance for you in the way you created that?
Well, I mean, I think for me, I fell in love with Ayurvedic medicine. I fell in love with natural health, so it was easy for me to do that. But when I started having kids, the kids in the family were the #1 priority, and I never really gave my career much of a thought. I just loved it. I loved the knowledge. I never really thought about the money. It just sort of grew organically until I had my 6th child. And when she was born at home, breech, and she wasn't breathing very well. So it was like I had a panic. Like she was a beautiful baby, but she wasn't breathing. And then within 10 seconds, I got her breathing, and she was fine. But I had my first panic attack in my life right then and there, and it sort of freaked me out. And I realized, sort of like in the wake of that event, I realized that I have 6 kids, and I don't have a retirement plan. I don't have any really savings. I haven't really thought about money ever in my life. And so that was sort of a wake-up call for me. The 6th one sort of pushed me over the edge. I went, okay, that's it. I need to take this business seriously. And then I started realizing that it was really fun to also grow a business and take the knowledge that we kind of developed for all these years and put it out there. And I've been riding that wave ever since.
So you just got the secret for your entrepreneurs who are struggling. The 6th child gets you motivated. So if you only have 2 or 3, you just got a little longer, and you'll be set. So we just got right here from John.
We rent ours out. Absolutely, for cheap. Yeah.
So thank you. So tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up, John. So tell me a little bit about your family.
I grew up in New York State, in Westchester County in New York, and a sister, an older sister, and I grew up in it was a pretty modest family. I was pretty normal kid and played a lot of sports, but wasn't super fantastic at them. I got better as I got a little older, and I had no idea what I was going to do. And then I got out of high school, and I was going to go to a university in New Hampshire, and in the last minute, like within 2 weeks, I decided to go to an aeronautical school and learn how to fly. And I did that. I almost joined the Air Force to fly, but decided not to do that. Came back, and my dad was a contractor builder, so I went into civil engineering and hated that with a passion, and then moved to Mexico. Tried to open a restaurant in Mexico. I ended up teaching skiing in Vail for a while, which I fell in love with this area, and this is interesting. I haven't told all these stories in a while, but I went to California that summer. It was I don't know if you go way back when the gas crisis was happening back in the 70s or something, and it was late 70s. So I hitchhiked to California and met a stunt coordinator and who became my mentor, like my grandfather, and he invited me to go to stunt school. So I did stunts for a while there. My mother kept calling me up saying, "What are you doing? You're like a playboy. Like, you have no job. You have no life. What are you going to go into Hollywood and become an actor? Is that what you're going to do? You can't be doing." And my mother is incredibly wonderful, and she's not like a nag, and she didn't do it like that. She did it much more subtle. Like, once every couple of weeks I'd call her, and she would just nudge me and say, "You need a skill. You need a career." And I was doing high falls and getting injured, and a friend of mine was doing the chiropractic school I went to high school with in LA. So I started seeing him as a chiropractor to get fixed up, and my mom just had that little influence nudging me, and before I knew it, I was in chiropractic school in LA.
Wow. And this is the emergence of being a chiropractor, right? I mean, this was a very boom time for that industry.
I guess, yeah, I guess I don't know. I didn't do it because it was just sort of, I loved, I was doing fasting and juice fasting, and Paul Bragg's book, he was one of my heroes, and so I was really into sort of weird natural health back then, so it seemed to fit and it made sense, and it was a skill, and I was getting beat up doing high falls, so that wasn't going to be a career for me. And also I was also living on the beach. This guy had this beautiful house, and he was like a father to me, and everybody that I met, all these producers, and I mean, it was really weird for me, this little kid from New York, being on the beach, living next to Robert Redford, for example, and all these producers coming up to me and saying, "Why do you want to get into this business? This is a terrible business. People backstab. It's terrible." So I'm like, there was like a phone on the beach, and this was like before cell phones. These people were living the life that, as this little kid from the suburb, like New York, Westchester County, you think that's the dream, and they were all miserable. I mean, it was just the weirdest thing, and I said to myself, this is really weird. These people are absolutely miserable. They're all telling me, "Don't do it. It's not worth it," and to get out of here. And my mom's going, "Get out of here." So I left.
So you did.
Yeah, and it was the best thing. I went into chiropractic school, and I heard the word Ayurveda, and I didn't even know what it was. I just fell in love with the word. So I went to a lecture to learn more about it. And it was an Indian guy, and he was giving this lecture. And after the lecture, I went up to him and I said, and I was a triathlete trying to be a better trainer. I was training for an Ironman at that point in time. This was 1981 or something. And so I went up to him after, I said, what do you think about doing a triathlon? Is this like Ayurvedic? Is it good? And he looked at me and he said, "What is it?" I said, "Well, you swim a lot and run a lot." And I told him how long it all was, and he looked at me and he said, "Why do you do that?" And I had no answer. I had no idea. And I was like, I just had no answer. I have no idea. I don't know. I guess I had no idea. And he looked at me like I was really an idiot. And he said, "Do you meditate?" And I was like, "Yes." I was like, "I do meditate," thinking that was the right answer. And he said, "Do you sleep while you meditate?" And I said, "Yes, absolutely. I get the deepest sleep when I meditate." And he said, like I was a real idiot, he was like, "Oh my God," he goes, "When you meditate, you shouldn't be sleeping. If you sleep when you meditate, you're exhausted. So you're obviously exercising way too much and you're deeply exhausted, so you should probably not do this triathlon." So I said, "Well, wait a minute. If I can meditate and stay awake and exercise, then it's good." And he said, "Yes. Because if you can meditate and stay what he called restful alertness, the ability to be, resting and alert, and not sleeping," which is what I was doing, which I thought was wonderful. He said it's okay. So then I started training based on how I could maintain restful alertness during my meditations, and I started training less and less and less and less. This is an absolutely true story. I started feeling stronger. I went away to meditation retreats and meditation courses and dove in deeper and deeper and deeper. I came home from one 2-week meditation course, and I remember we used to hop on these. I used to work with this volleyball player, and we used to jump bleachers, on one leg, hop on one leg, and go up and down, then exhaust your right leg, and then do your left leg. And I could never jump. I was definitely the classic white guy who could never jump kid. And I got on those bleachers after being 2 weeks of doing nothing, where they said you can't exercise, you can't run, you can't. I just meditated and did yoga and meditated and did yoga. And I was hopping on those bleachers twice as fast as this Olympic volleyball player. And he looked at me and was like, "What are you doing?" And I said, I don't know. This is just weird. And I swear I felt like I could still be jumping those bleachers today. I had so much energy in my leg. He exhausted his right and his left leg. I was still trying to get exhausted, and I couldn't. And he went, and I said, "I learned to meditate. I've been doing this meditation thing. I don't know what it is, but there's something special about less is more. I've been training less. My performance went up." And he learned how to meditate like the next week. I started competing really effectively. All my triathlon friends, I was in South Bay in California, in LA, all my friends thought I was on steroids, every one of them. Because I went from being like a mediocre triathlete to competing in the top 10. And that's an absolutely true story. So that freaked me out. I was like, less is way more. So I wrote a book called Body, Mind, Sport, which is, I ended up going to India for 1986 now, and that was a 2-week vacation to go study Ayurveda, and came back a year and a half later. I had a practice in Boulder in 1986, and I left for 2 weeks to go study and came back. I got invited to stay and learn Ayurveda there, and I called my friend, my partner, up on the phone and said, "I'm not coming back." And getting a phone line in India in 1986 was quite difficult. You could barely hear each other, and all he got was that I wasn't coming home. And I came back almost 2 years later. Somebody I didn't even know had my car. All my stuff was in different places. I had no idea where anything was. It was just the weirdest thing. I came back and sort of regrouped my stuff, and then got in the car and drove to California and married my wife. And went to India and married my wife and took her back to India, and we lived there, and I studied Ayurveda more, and I met Deepak Chopra there, and my wife got pregnant in India. You're getting the whole story. And she was throwing up and fainting in streets. The smells were so bad, so we needed to get out of there bad. And Deepak said, "I just opened a center in Massachusetts. Would you come and run it with me?" I had, he needed somebody to run the Ayurvedic center for him, which I did. I came back and ran his center for 8 years, and traveled and lectured with Deepak for about 8 years. And then he ended up going to San Diego, and I came here, and I've been here ever since. That is it. That's the story.
Well, that I appreciate it. That's a great backdrop to kind of get us prepared into what's led to you to become an entrepreneur. So, sounds like, so one of the characteristics of an entrepreneur is somebody who's willing to take risk, right? And everyone has a degree of what that means. But it sounds like that's, you did these things, right? You just kind of went and stayed in India for 2 years, and you married somebody you just met, and so do you feel that kind of, and you're, I didn't know anything about being, a stuntman, so all that stuff, do you feel that kind of prepared you for starting your business? And so, how did that all kind of line up?
I think I was really blessed because I loved it. I loved what I was learning. I loved the knowledge I was passionate about, and I think that's what drove it. I think that's the real key for me. It was just, I just loved it, and I sort of knew that I was doing the right thing, and I never thought for a second that this wasn't going to be hugely successful. I just had kids that kept coming and coming and coming, and they're like, "Wow." My oldest daughter says, she was like, "Another one? You guys are pregnant again?" And
how old are your children?
My oldest is 26, and my youngest is 10. Yeah. And so I really, the family was the primary thing, and my business really wasn't at all primary. But I did have, a wake-up call in maybe some of you remember this, but in 1998, on Christmas Eve, my building burned down. It was over on Center Green Drive. Remember that fire? It was a big fire. There was a lot of natural doctors in Boulder that were in this building. It was a 20,000 square foot building. And in Ayurveda, you do a lot of massages with oils and things like that, and some of the oils in the towel in the dryer spontaneously combusted and burned the building down. It burned for 3 days. My daughter was sitting in our living room, and she said, "Daddy, I think your building is on fire." She was watching the TV. And I was like, "What?" I looked at the TV, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's my building." So I raced down to Center Green Drive, which is off of Belmont, and it was burned down. It was burning. It burned for 3 days. And the landlord vented the dryer over an extra 30 feet about 3 or 4 months before, and it must have backdrafted and burned the dryer down, and the dryer spontaneously combusted and burned the building down. So I was sued for a bunch of $1 million by about 13 different people, which I understand because I burnt their building down and ruined their business. So I was sued for a chunk of money. I don't know. I think it was $3 or $4 million, something like that. And I told my attorney, I said, they send you, ever been sued? They send you stacks of stuff in the mail. It's big, thick things. And I was like, there's no way I'm reading any of this stuff. I said, I have a box next to my garbage in the garage, and that's where it's going. You want me to read any of it, call me, because I'm just not going to get stressed out about this. My kids were going, "Is Daddy going to be this is Christmas? Is he going to be really depressed for Christmas? Is that what's going to happen?" And I was like, but I realized through that process that, I felt like everybody in Boulder hated my guts because I ruined their life. I was being sued. I lost my business. I had really minimal insurance of anything. So I really lost everything. And but I had my family, and I had the people that I loved, and I really felt somehow like it was really clear what really mattered, and it was something that could never be taken away, which was something that was really deep inside of me, and it was a real wake-up call for me. And I also told my patients, I said, never, if you get fired, don't just race back and take the first job and make some money. This is a time where you can design your life. So I wanted to design my life. So I figured I lost my business, I lost my practice, and I said, I'm just going to write another book. And we started some medical camps in India and did some things for some of the poor people in India. My wife, at a certain point, I needed to get a job. I needed to start seeing patients again, and time went by. My wife's going, "So, are you gonna get a job?" And I was like, "Well, I'm designing a life here, and I want to do what I've practiced, what I've been preaching all these years. That it's okay to just really let something unfold." And we're going. I think we had 5 kids at the time. We're sort of falling off this financial cliff. There was really no money. I hadn't, so I was getting a little bit pressured, but I really didn't want to just jump, and I didn't want to do. We had an Ayurvedic detox center, and it was just detox, and it was a lot of work, and it burnt this clinic down, and I was sort of fried, officially, literally. So I got a call from the New Jersey Nets, and they said, they had read my first book, Body, Mind, Sport, which was the book about sports and less is more and all that. And they said, "Would you come and do some in-services with us?" And I said, "Sure." And I did. And they had some guys that got injured, so I started working on them. And I did, at that point, a lot of sports chiropractic. And so the next thing I know, they were offering me a job. But that was in New Jersey, and I lived in Boulder, and I had kids in school in Boulder. And I was like, "We really want to offer you a full-time job?" And I said, "No. I can't live in New Jersey. I've got." I live in,
You got a good job.
Have you ever been to Boulder? I've lived in New York, which is right across the river from New Jersey, and I know you don't see the sun for weeks on end, and I just couldn't do it. And I had one of the players who was really a big mouth, sort of really wanted me to work there, and they talked me up, so. I was in the office of the general manager of the New Jersey Nets, and he looked at me and he said, "We really want you to work here." And I said, "Yeah, but John, I have kids, 5 kids, and I can't move my family here. It's just not going to happen." He goes, "What would it take to get you here?" And I felt like I was in the mafia. He goes to me, he takes a piece of paper, and he says, "Here, with the pencil," he goes, "Here, write a number down on a piece of paper. Write a number down." I said, "What?" He goes, "Whatever number it will take, just write it down. Tell me what you need to get you here." I said, "John, I don't have a number. I don't want to work here. I'm telling you, I don't want to work here." And he goes, "No, write a number. Come on, just give me a number, any number." And I'm like, "John, you don't get it. I live in Boulder, right? It's it's not about the money." And he said, "I'll give you $1 million a year for 3 years. Will you take that?" And I said, John, it's not about the money. I'm telling you, I can't move to New Jersey. So that meeting ended. I called my wife up. They offered me $1 million a year for 3 years, and I shut it down. I turned it down. No way, I'm not going to move to New Jersey for $1 million a year. She said, "Are you kidding me? You can move to New Jersey. I'll stay here in Boulder. I'll stay in 3 years. Are you kidding me?" You don't have to move to New Jersey. We're not moving to New Jersey, but you can go. I mean, for $1 million a year, are you kidding me? You should be, So anyway, I didn't take it, and they still wanted me. So they had this big meeting in Atlantic City with the owners, and they said, "What would you take?" And I gave some ridiculous number that they couldn't even afford, so that shut them down. So then they said, "We still want you to come." So then there was another big meeting in New York City in some big high rise. All the owners were there. And one guy said, "Why don't we just have him come for $300,000 a year, and he'll give him a bunch of bonuses if he does really well, and he'll come 18 days a month, and he can still have his time in Boulder, and we'll do that for the first season, see how it goes." We went from being the third most injured team in the league to the third least injured team in the league in that year. Almost made the playoffs, and I made a crazy amount of money, way more than I would have made staying here and doing it in practice. Had the best time of my life traveling with an NBA team. It was just fantastic. And so after that season, I went back to India. We had some Indian herbal companies give us herbal medicines, which I took to the most remote place in India I could find, like in the Himalayan foothills, off the last road, an 8-hour ride on a jeep through the riverbed to get to these little tiny villages where people were starving and really poor and had no medical care. And we just started dispensing all these herbs to that these Indian companies gave us for free. So I'm sitting there in the middle of absolutely nowhere. I couldn't find myself, let alone someone finding me. And this boy comes up and he goes, "Dr. John, Dr. John." And I said, "Yeah." And he comes over and he walks over and he goes, and he reaches into his pocket and he goes, "I have a fax for you." And he reaches in this fax that had been crinkled up like, 1,000,000 times, and you could barely read it. And it said that the lawsuit was settled out of court and it's completely over. I looked at that and I was like, wow, how cool is that? Like I didn't really let that thing, they could take away they could sue me. I didn't let that bother me. And I just chose to I don't know, it was just, I don't mean to sound like I was really special. It was just sort of naturally, like I had this choice to be really depressed. Everybody in Boulder hated my guts and sued me, or I could love my family and follow my dreams. And I was like, that sounded really bad, and this sounded okay, right? So that's what I did, and I didn't look at that at all, and magic things happened, and so that's sort of how that sort of got me really more into what I call the Ayurvedic psychology, which I really practice a lot now. Is really understanding the real. And that's what's beautiful about Ayurveda. It's all about the science of letting the truth of you out, not being duped by illusion or need or needing someone to love you, like you, approve of you, care for you. But the reality is we're like the sun, right? Our nature is like the sun, which wants to give and care and love. And, our mind says, no, you shouldn't do that because they don't deserve it. You shouldn't love them because they don't deserve it. They're mean to you, and they're, so we choose to wall ourselves off. It's like the sun saying, they're killing cattle in Brazil, they're chopping trees down in Texas, and the moon, oh my God, I shine light on that thing for 1 billion years, and nothing, not even a sprout. I mean, are you kidding me? So the sun goes, no sun for Brazil, no sun for Texas, and no sun for the moon ever again, right? So like if the sun did that, it would implode, right? And really, we have science now to prove that if we don't act on our love, we actually have real science, and we can get into that. That stress of holding back the truth of you implodes, goes right through your intestinal tract. You make 95% of your serotonin in your gut. Those are made by trillions of microbes, and when you're stressed out, the microbes die, the good ones die, the serotonin is not produced, and you can't stabilize your mood or support optimal health. So there's a real science behind this concept of Ayurvedic psychology, which is to really begin to scrub what old patterns of behavior we have from childhood that are keeping us from letting the truth of us out. Many of us have a husband or wife, we care for them, we love them, but we hold back. We don't give ourselves fully to those relationships. And that lack of fullness impacts your physiology, your health, but also impacts your ability to give yourself fully to your business, to your job, or to your career, or to your family. And if you're not loving your family well, or your wife well, they're going to feel it, right? At some subtle level, they're going to feel not loved. And as a result of feeling not loved, they contract and retreat. And when they contract and retreat, you feel like they don't love you. So then you contract and retreat, right? So you end up living this parallel life and never really experience the magic of true love. The magic of letting the maybe very delicate petals of your flower open and let the truth of you out. And that's what Ayurveda is. It's about letting the truth of you out. And I sort of stumbled along for a lot of years, banging against the side of the road, and somehow got lucky to realize that there's a game of life and we can play it. And I'm not saying that I've won the game. I'm a beginner at it, but it's a game of life and it's absolutely worth playing. And it has to do with realizing that we have all our mind convinces us why we shouldn't let that delicate, loving, giving version of ourselves out. And the game of life is to realize, become more aware of when that's happening and what are the action steps that you can take to free yourself from some of those old patterns of behavior. So, and I think along the way, it frees you to tap into your truth and your passion so you can be more successful in what you're doing. I don't think you can be successful unless you give yourself fully to something. And I think it's hard for us to give ourselves fully to things. Our family, our relationships, our job. We sort of hold back for fear of losing it, or not being loved back, or not being successful. And those are all, the fruits on the tree, the opportunities to scrub old patterns that made you fearful or worried about, failure or all that.
And so how did you use, obviously you're very passionate about the work you do. And so you learned some of these principles as you were studying, and then you brought them to your business. How did you use these principles in building LifeSpa? So where is it that you were successful in that, and maybe where is it that you fell down sometimes?
I don't know if I'm the best entrepreneur for this discussion because I've never taken a business class in my life. I'm afraid to say. So I probably did it the wrong way. I think the reason why I got successful was because my sixth child freaked me out, and I had to take my business and making money seriously. And I've been teaching for all these years, and I realized that I just got lucky. I was developing products for other companies, herbal products, and I was getting paid to do that. And I realized one day, why am I developing products for them? Why don't I just develop products for me? That was it's pretty stupid to do that for a long time because you can make a lot more money if you have your own products. So I started my own line. I had all these contacts from India. I had all these herbal farmers that I had connected with. I had so many contacts. I'd been to India 20-something times by that point. So I was like, why not? So I started my own herbal line, and so we had an Ayurvedic spa. I had an herbal line, and I wanted to do newsletters and do videos and put my knowledge out on video and just give the knowledge out. And the technology wasn't really there back then, and so I went to India for some herbal festival, and I met Joe Mercola. I don't know if you know Mercola.com, but he's a big website guy. So Joe became a good friend of mine, and I lectured at this place a few times, and Joe looked at me and he said, "Why are you seeing patients?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You should do what I do. You should just and I said, "Well, I've been trying to do the web thing." I didn't know Joe Mercola from Adam. I didn't know who he was at that point. And he said, "You should do it." And I said, "What do you do?" And he told me this whole thing. And so I went back, and the technology just started coming on board. So I started doing videos. Now we have over 250 Ayurvedic self-help videos online with over way more articles, and they're all referenced. And our whole stick is to take ancient wisdom and prove it with modern science. So that's totally what I love, is to go back and look at these ancient, principles and then find science to prove them. I just stumbled upon one today that I was just totally blown away by. I was looking at, does water cause thermogenesis? When you drink a lot of water, does it help you lose weight? Well, there's an Ayurvedic principle: you should drink a lot of water before you eat your food, like a half an hour before, based on the fact that the stomach is lined with water. buffering agents, like carbonate, that helps buffer the acid. So you have a lot of water prior to the meal, you can make more acid. If you have no water, therefore no buffers, the acid will burn your stomach and cause an ulcer, so the stomach doesn't produce acid. So today I found, just before I got here, I found this study that said that you take, it was a well-documented study, that you take a glass of water a half hour before the meal, it increases thermogenesis to help you lose weight, and therefore it helps you increase acid. I'm like, that is so cool, because here we have thousands of years old people, 1,000 years old science saying that you should do that, and now we have science to prove it. And I put out a blog and a newsletter 3 times a week, and there'll be one about that study coming out in a few weeks about that. And I just love that concept, because I think these ancient people really did know something. Not everything, for sure, but and that's what we write about, and that's what and so I totally love it, and we put it out, and people send the videos to their friends, and we have a store, and people buy products, and and all of a sudden my company has just grown and grown and grown and grown, and it's basically by putting the knowledge out for free. That's what we do. We put out all the knowledge is free, and it's real designed to get people to help themselves. And there's a store, but that's not the main thing. Not like buy now kind of things all over the place. It's just real knowledge based and educational based, and it's been exploding. We're growing 25-30% a year. We barely can keep up with the growth. So I don't even know if I answered your question, but I think the trick was, it's always been not about the money, and it's been about giving the knowledge away, and that's fed me all these years, so I just keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because the business, theory is give away content, right? Back in the day, retail was location, location, location. Now the web is about content. And they teach this. This is something where, there's content strategy, content writers. It just seems like you inherently knew this, and maybe that was part of what you learned from this one guy that you met on your journey. But that is what people are doing now to create value. And so I wouldn't say it's luck. I think it sounds like you met the right people. You put yourself in position. You were authority, so people connected with you, and you have the knowledge. So.
When I was at Deepak, I used to teach. We had a doctor's training program there, and I was this chiropractor teaching all these medical doctors, which was sort of awkward. And the doctors who were the co-directors of this doctor's training program, well, they hated me because I was teaching. They kept telling me not to teach so much. They go, "You're teaching everything. There's nothing left. There's nothing left to sell. Why are you teaching so much?" And I just couldn't believe that. I just couldn't believe that you're asking me not to teach. Like, to teach half of it. Like, how? I don't even know how to do that. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, not say. All I know is, like, I felt like I knew so little. If I didn't teach all of it, I have nothing to say. That's sort of what it was like, I said, I'm going to run out of stuff to say. I don't know anything. If I have to teach everything of the little, you know what I mean? So that was just sort of like a real great example for me of what not to do, And then from there, I just sort of, was just so adamant about, the knowledge is free, and it has to be free. And I was blessed to learn it for free. No one charged me. My teacher didn't charge me. He gave it to me for free. I think that's got to be free.
The business of Ayurveda and the alternative health. So talk about it seems like one of the key components is doshas. And so can you talk about what they are and why that's important as one of the components of your industry?
Well, a dosha is a representative of one of the different body types. So Ayurveda is a system of medicine that's based on nature, study and science of nature, right? So winter it's cold out and it's very dry. So that principle of coldness and dryness exists in everything, in certain foods like broccoli. Raw broccoli would be sort of cold and dry. There's people who are cold and dry, right? People who are always they're very vata. So you have more winter properties in your body type. There's people who are fiery like summer, and they have more fire or pitta in their body type. So they don't never wear a coat or a jacket or a hat, and they have more fire. They're more competitive and driven. And there's people who are kapha. Kapha means to stick together, which means water and earth to be congested, and they're easygoing and mellow and calm. So if you were a hunter-gatherer in the cave, the vata types would be drawing beautiful pictures on the walls of the stars and all that. looking at, all these etherical things. The pitta types would be chopping down the wall, trying to create a deck overlooking the valley, making another room on the cave. And the kapha types would be saying, will you stop banging? It's fine the way it is. We don't need another room. We don't need an addition. We don't need a deck. We're good. Come back here, sit by the fire. Let's tell some stories. Let's have some fun. That's the kapha. Kapha just want to communicate and gel together. Pittas want to change the world. And vata types are the artists and the creative ones. And we all have all of that in us, but some of us have more or less. And that's sort of what makes up the unique body types. And of course, people who have a lot of winter, nature harvests, squirrels eat nuts and roots and in the wintertime because they're high protein and high fat. So what's really cool about nature is that the extreme of winter, which is cold and dry, is antidote by the harvest, which is nuts and seeds and roots and vegetables and more meats in your diet. In the spring, when it's rainy, muddy, and congested allergy season, the harvest is leafy greens and sprouts, very dry foods. In the summer, when it's very hot, nature gives us cooling fruits and vegetables. So nature never let us get overheated or too dry or cold or too wet and mucousy. Nature's antidote was always in the harvest. So we have the influence of nature and then the antidote in its harvest, which is just a beautiful concept. And if you are a really hot person eating really hot, spicy food in a really hot season, in a really hot place, you're going to overheat and scream and yell and throw pots and pans, right? So logically, you would look at the grocery list that says what foods are really cooling, and you would eat them. They just happen to be harvested in the summer. Actually, I left some brochures, and one of those is a grocery list for spring. So it gives you all the foods that are harvested in the spring. And all you got to do is look at the list of all the foods harvested from around the world in the spring, and come spring, which is hopefully coming soon, you can just circle the foods on there that you like and just eat more of those foods. Don't think about what you shouldn't eat. Think about what you can eat more of. And that's a great concept in terms of eating. What can I eat more of? Nature is harvesting these things. I should be eating them. So we change our diet dramatically from winter to summer to spring. There's 3 major growing seasons. And so we follow the growing seasons as opposed to, there's not 4 growing seasons, there's 3. So there's 3 harvests, therefore 3 major seasons that relate to the 3 major body types. That's your Ayurveda 101 lesson about. But it's pretty logical, it's a beautiful science.
So where does where does this go next, right? I mean, so you're in this alternative, healthcare space, and we have this system of healthcare, which is really sickness care, and the more you get sick, the more money all these companies make. Where does your trade, where do you fit into helping solve that? Because it's not sustainable. I mean, there's a great book by the chairman of Gallup called The Coming Jobs War, and as a percentage of per capita, we spend way more on health care than any other country. And as you calculate out the cost and the growth, then sooner or later you bankrupt this country because of that cost. How did you solve that?
Well, in Ayurveda, traditionally, the doctors of ancient times actually did it differently. They would actually they were paid when their people were healthy, and if someone got sick, they stopped getting paid. So that was their motivation. Their motivation was, I get paid when they're healthy. So if someone was unhealthy, I better get in there and get them healthy again. That was an interesting motivation. So when I came back from India, I said, well, I'm going to do that. So, well, I didn't exactly do that, but what I did, this might be not, what I learned in India was pulse diagnosis, and it's a diagnostic technique you learn to see if you're in or out of balance. So I told my patients, I said, if I take your pulse and I document the imbalance, we had a little pulse computer to measure that even, to prove that what it was there. And I said, if you come back in a month and it's not any better and it's not changed, I won't charge you for the visit. I said, but if it comes back in a month and the pulse has changed better and you're feeling better, then of course I'll charge you because we did good, But I'm gonna get paid if I do my job, which is to change your pulse and make that difference. And it was just the weirdest thing because people sort of said they would come back a month and they go, I'm not better, I want a refund. And I was like, okay, we never mentioned a refund, first of all. We mentioned that I wouldn't charge you the next visit if the pulse didn't change. No. You said if I wasn't well, I would get a refund. And I was like, one of my golden rules in practice was never argue over money. I just to me, it wasn't worth it. So I said, okay, here's your money back. So we gave him the refund. And that, we would laugh, my staff and I would laugh about this because everybody was like, it was the weirdest, and I was like, am I not saying this clearly? Am I not, it was just the motivation that people would rather get a refund rather than get well. And I said, okay, we got to stop doing this. So I stopped doing it. And so I tried. At least I tried anyway. But it was like the motivation was like you said. It's just functional. We're in such a disease model that I didn't have the endurance to break it. I was going broke, giving all the refunds. It wasn't that many really, but it was enough that it was like not working.
Yeah, I can understand. Because we're so conditioned, right?
Right.
So why don't we take some questions? So if you can raise your hand, I'll call on you, and then I'm going to repeat the question so we can get it on the mic. So what questions do you have for John? Yes.
Is there a component of spirituality in your healing? Or is it purely physical diet?
No, I think that's
so the question.
Yeah.
The question is spirituality a piece of your practice and your what you recommend?
I mean, I think in Ayurveda, that's what's unique about Ayurveda is it's really about Ayur means life, Veda means truth. It means the truth of your life. So the body, we process stress through our gut. It takes out our body. The body becomes very dense, physically dense, in pain, struggling. And Ayurveda was a system of medicine to bring the body back into balance, so it was therefore less dense. When the body is less dense physically, we have more mental clarity, more awareness of what we're projecting on the screen to be safe and secure. And as a result of that awareness, we can take action to free ourselves from mental patterns of behavior, the need to be loved, and patterns that aren't serving us any longer, and then take action steps to free ourselves and be more loving and be more kind. So in that regard, it absolutely is spiritual. That's the goal, is to let that part of you out. I like it because there's not a lot of dogma around it. You don't have to be a religion. You can do it. You can do this in any religion. You can love your wife or your husband, no matter what religion you are. But Ayurveda is about making you aware, self-aware, by using your body as the conduit for that awareness, so you know what to do. Many people come home and they are mean to their. I'll tell you a quick story about that if I have time.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this woman came to me and she was going to do Panchakarma, which is an Ayurvedic rejuvenation treatment we do in Boulder. It's 7 days, 2.5 hours of treatments. They do 6-7 hours of yoga, breathing, meditation per day. It's a real retreat, and definitely not for everyone. You have to really want to go in there and do some real deep detox and healing and transformation. So she said, my husband smokes pot every day for 10 years. And I said, wow. She goes, I have a job, I make the money, I take care of the kids, I drive them here, drive them there. He stays home, he has no job, no life. And the house is a disaster. The fields aren't mowed, the fences are in disrepair, the dog pen's a complete disgusting mess. I drive home, I look at my yard, my house, I hate my life, I scream and yell for him to get a job and get a life. He does nothing. I don't know what to do. I've become this angry, screaming person, and I said, do you love this guy? And she said, yeah, I do. I said, I'm really curious to know what it is about this guy you love. So tonight, as your homework, I want you to go home and write a love letter to him, because you said you love him, right? She goes, yeah. So write a love letter to him, and I said, when you write the letter, ask yourself very clearly what it is you love about him and how it feels to write the letter. How does it feel when you actually access that love? And she says, okay, I'll go home. And she comes home the next day. I said, how was it? She goes, I have had a lot of resentment and a lot of anger. But when I finally got through all the anger and resentment and I tapped into the love, I have to admit, it felt really good. I felt the love. It felt really wonderful. I felt warm and expanded, and I felt loved, and I felt appreciated. I said, wait a minute. I said, for the last 10 years, your mind had convinced you that you had to be mean to him. They sent a message that it was not okay to not have a job, not have a life. So therefore, your mind had convinced you had to be mean, because if you were nice and loving to him, he would think it's okay to be sort of a loser and not have a job or a life. So therefore, you had to be mean to him, and hopefully that he would someday change, and then you could be your happy-go-lucky self, right? But now all of a sudden, and your happiness depended on him changing for all these years, right? So I said, but now all of a sudden you write this letter, you access the love, and you got all happy, and he's still smoking pot. Nothing's changed. So his behavior really has nothing to do with you being happy. That's up to you. You have that choice. But you've let his behavior make you into something that you're not, and you're pissed at him, but you're really pissed at yourself for letting him make you into a thing you're not. Right? So I said, so here's your next step. I said, I want you to take that letter, make it into a template of truth of the relationship, and take it home every night. And instead of yelling and screaming about the yard and how terrible it is, I want you to act on the love. And just put your arms around him and just act on how the truth of the relationship. You love him, act on it. Nothing else. Don't act on him anymore. Act on you. Right? Stop acting on their behavior. Start acting on you. So she did that. And I said, just make him a cup of tea, and just when you're driving down the road, just rehearse all the things that you wrote that made you feel expanded. She did that. On the 4th day, she came back. So absolutely true story. She came back. She walked to my office and she said, John, it was a miracle. I said, what? She goes, I drove home last night. The yard was mowed. The fields were mowed. The fences were repaired. The sprinklers were working. The dog pen was cleaned up. I hadn't seen my yard look that clean in 10 years. And I said, how did you feel in these last 4 days loving him? She goes, it was so nice not to yell and scream. I said, how do you think he felt? She goes, I don't know. He cleaned the yard. And I said, I think he felt safe in your sunlight to let the very delicate petals of himself open and let the truth of him out. And you were feeling safe to let the truth of you out. That sunlight made him feel safe to open the petals of his flower and let the truth of him out. And that's called true love. I didn't love him with the expectation he would clean the yard. She never in a million years thought that would ever happen. That was never on our radar. You did it because it was your truth. And he loved you and did the yard because he felt safe to come out of his pot-smoking sort of protective cocoon and let the truth of him out. So the point being, that's, in my mind, very spiritual in answering the question. It's really about, doing something as simple as, realizing that the opportunities that exist to be spiritual exist in our daily life every single moment of every day with our family. The ones that we're the closest to are the ones that we treat the worst oftentimes. And those are the ones that can provide the most growth. Not on the yoga mat or with the guru. Yeah, that's all fine. But the biggest teachers are the ones that we don't learn from. We choose not to. And that, I think is a beautiful thing. And I definitely feel like that's something that I have definitely learned. To have 6 kids and a wife all this time, I had to learn how to love. I really did. I didn't know it teaches you that. And I didn't know what love was. I don't think a lot of guys do, really. I don't know. And I realized, I always thought my wife, if she was a little better, more like this or a little more like that, that I would love her more. But there was something wrong with her, I mean, we loved each other, but if there was anything that was wrong, it was something wrong with her, I was fine, There's nothing wrong with me. She's weird,
No one in this room thinks that way, right? You don't have to do a show of hands.
So I realized it was my problem. I was too chicken to actually give myself fully to my relationship with my wife. I was just chicken. I didn't even know how to do that. And so that's when I think that's when my world really changed. Learning how to give myself fully to something, my wife and my family, and then my business and my job. And the thing that was weird is I always thought that I couldn't do my business fully and my family fully. I had to choose one. There was enough of me to go around. That's what I was convinced of. And I think we all are sort of convinced that there's not enough for me. I can't love them and them and them and them and them. You're going to run out of gas. The truth is, if you love them with an expectation that they love you back, or take care of you, or feed you, then you will be exhausted because they will not fulfill your expectations. They always let you down. So if I love and they don't fulfill me and they don't return the investment, I'm going to go broke with all these bad investments, right? But if you love like the sun, who doesn't give a damn if the flower blossoms, doesn't care if you chop down the trees, and you do that, there's something different about that energy. You don't get exhausted. So I was always convinced that I couldn't do my business fully and really have a career and have 6 kids. I was convinced of that. And now I realize that there's nothing that I can't, I can love all of it, and it all works, and it's sort of the weirdest thing. But that's something that I definitely, from a business point, I definitely know that. I figured that out.
And in comparison, it's really similar to when you learned about your training, right? About less is more.
Yeah.
And it's
right.
the same theory.
It is exactly.
growing now more so than ever because, and kind of go along with that question, like had you started a business like this in the 80s or 90s, do you think it would have been as successful? And do you have any competitors that do what you do with as much experience that you have? You know what I mean? Like, is there anyone in California who practices Ayurvedic medicine and has a clinic and stuff?
Yeah.
So real quick, so a couple of questions. So one question is do you feel that this industry is growing right now? I mean, versus, you've seen it over time. And then second is really kind of the competitive landscape.
Definitely, the industry is growing. I mean, 30 years ago, we thought Ayurveda was like going to be the next thing. And, I've been doing this for 30 years now, and it never happened. Most people still don't even know what it is, And we think that it's happening now. I mean, I just had a meeting with the Yoga Journal, and they're all excited about making Ayurveda more substantial. So maybe it's happening, but I wouldn't bank on it. But I think the natural health industry is exploding, for sure. Ayurveda, I think, is going, but I couldn't bank on it. But in my world, it's exploding. I think for the reasons we mentioned, I think because we're doing something that's sort of unique. And I am really fortunate. I went to India in 1986. I came back. There was just a handful of Ayurvedic practitioners in the country at that point in time. So I was sort of lucky to be one of the first ones in a very small pond. And so in that world, I have a little bit of a head start for sure.
Like what you were saying, it's grounded in science. So unlike other holistic maybe health approaches, there's a lot to Ayurvedic science. So I think that specific space is growing a lot now.
I think that my company and what we do with the articles we put out are all well referenced. So I go the extra mile to put the references down. You go on the web and you read all this stuff, and none of it's got a reference. You don't know who to believe or what to believe. And I get so much feedback all the time about saying thank you for going that extra mile to reference what you say. So when I say one of our taglines is to prove ancient wisdom with modern science, and my job is to prove it. I can tell you what I feel all day long, and I do a little bit of that, but it's always after I've proved what I think with modern science. And I think that's also the key for me is to be really, as verifiable as I possibly could be. And I think people learn to trust that.
Yeah, I think that's Ayurvedic medicine's competitive edge right there.
Yeah.
Is that you will go out of its way to prove what they're saying.
Yeah.
So next question, right back here.
All right. Actually, my wife went to India to an Ayurveda course, and she spent a few months there as well. And now she actually wants to do Panchakarma, and she wants me to do the Panchakarma with her. I don't know too much about Panchakarma. It's just fairly recent. So I want to ask you if there are any risks, or would you recommend to anyone to do that? Because it's almost a month in India. She wants to go to India to do the Panchakarma in India. And another interesting part, I signed to this talk. I didn't even know it's over there. And just too funny.
Yeah.
So the question is about the process of Panchakarma and who's it for, and are there any downsides or risks?
Well, I think in India, going to India is an endurance event. Just going to India. Going to India and doing Panchakarma is an endurance event on steroids. It's like it's challenging in India. At the same time, and it depends in India, there's different types of Panchakarma in India. Some of them are really knock-down, drag-out endurance events, and some are more on the rejuvenating side. So it really depends on where you go and what kind of Panchakarma you're embarking in. So that's the difference. Here, Panchakarma that we do is much more on the rejuvenating side and much more geared towards transformational change and the Ayurvedic psychology. We rehab the digestive system and rehab the ability to be a good detoxifier, and we rejuvenate the body, and we also then guide you through an emotional process. Because really at the end of the day, it's this crazy mind of ours that really causes most of the problems. And if we don't, and that's why Ayurveda is so cool, because it helps the body feel safe. And when the body feels safe, it burns fat. And the research at the National Institutes of Health has found that there are molecules of emotion. They store and lodge in receptors in your body. And if you don't release those old emotions, they will actually block the flow of what they actually call an information network. The same receptors for your emotions are used by your immune system, your endocrine system, your hormones, your psychology, and your entire nervous system. So they said the takeaway from the NIH research was if you don't release your emotions, it'll block the flow of this whole information network and cause disease. Now in Ayurveda, they said thousands of years ago, if you have old toxic emotions, it'll block the flow of the subtle energy and cause disease. And so Panchakarma was about releasing, bringing the body into balance so it's less dense, so then you can have the access to the emotions and make the change. In India, that piece is missing. And for lots of reasons. I think because India was attacked and knowledge was stolen. So there's a lot of the lack of that. There's a lot of saving face that goes on in India where the emotional components are rarely seen in India. I studied in India all my life. I never heard the emotional component until after my fire. I went back to India and I found someone who taught me the Ayurvedic psychology piece. I realized that's what the whole thing's about. And so I wrote an article. If you ever want to learn more about this, it's called The Psychophysiology of Stress. It's free. It's on my website. And it talks about, and I went through the Ayurvedic textbooks, and I went and I read the major textbook, and throughout the entire textbook, it talks all about the transformational process of releasing these emotions, which Ayurveda sort of became the detox system. Just do body detox. But the detox is a means to an end. And that is the magic of Ayurveda, is the transformational aspect. And that is missing. It was missing. I did it from 1986 to 1998. 99, full time. And it was just detox. It wasn't until I came back and reopened my Ayurveda after the fire, reopened a new clinic with that mission in mind to make transformational change. That's the only reason I have a clinic today, is to do that deep work, because that's the magic. Detox, yeah, it's great, but it's not transformational. So going to India is a good detox, whether you're going to get the emotional guidance to do the deep transformational change. That is sort of risk, I don't know. It depends on where you go and whether it's there or not. But it's not prevalent, that's for sure.
Okay, got one more question.
So listening to your story, it sounds like you just kind of have followed your passion and love for the work you've done, and it's gotten you to good places or had some sort of success, as you probably define it. I didn't really hear necessarily you had a vision for what you wanted to do, and I'm curious if you had a vision for where the company goes from here, and if you're having success as you grow, bringing people on board, if handing that over or getting other people on board to take them along with you has been easy, or challenges, or that sort of thing.
So the question is really about your growth and how you've indoctrinated your team, and is it easy to find people, and then kind of what's your vision next?
I think originally there wasn't a vision. I was just following this wave of interest, and it sort of evolved and organically grew, and then. But I think now I actually really do have a vision, and the vision is to create a company that can really create careers. And real good careers for my team, and that's sort of something that I never really thought about, because I never thought about growing a big business. But now, as we are growing, I'm realizing that I have the opportunity to create, a business, a job, and an income, and a lifestyle, and really support people and their families, and that is just a cool thing to be able to just do that, and do it in a place from real integrity, in a place of love and care, and do it in the right way. And so we're making strides as much as we can as we grow to kind of put that money back into the staff and into, but that's sort of a really something that's new for me in terms of my vision right now, is to help to sort of grow the company for that reason, because it's a really great feeling to be able to do that.
But interesting, so the vision is as much about your employees and building their capacity to do the work that you've been doing?
It was weird because in a lot of ways, I feel like my lifestyle from the very beginning, I always had a full practice. I always made money. I feel like my lifestyle back then is the same as it is now. I don't really have I have way more money or less money, but I have all these employees, and there's sort of a magic feeling in that team feeling that's there, and yeah, there's a motivation to grow this, because it's like having a garden almost. You could grow something, and it's really beautiful to watch it grow and watch it flourish, and watch the people grow and flourish as well. And so I think there's a big chunk of it. I don't really do a lot of think about my vision, plan ahead in 5, 10 years. Like I said, I probably should do doing a lot of goal setting and all that, but I never really did that. But now there's definitely something really special. When I think about growing the company, I think about, this is really cool. My staff what I always wanted was to give them a career that they can actually really live on, not just a little minimal wage where they can barely make it, but really make it into something that's great. And that's a really good feeling.
Okay, so we're gonna I just want to wrap up. So we have John brought a newsletter. If you want all this great free information, I'm going to just pass this around here, and if you put your name in again, if it's your choice to opt into that. And John also has some information about some of the work he does over there on the table, because I asked him to bring it in because this is something that's new to a lot of us. So I just want to personally thank you for taking this time tonight. I've learned so much more about you and the work you do. I think hopefully you guys feel that you've learned a lot about this topic and maybe about yourself, and maybe explore more down the road. So I just want to say, please give it up for John. So what I'd like to do is allow each of you guys